I'm talking to Dean Sappenfield of the College of Architecture. Today is October 29th, 1976. And Dean Sappenfield, I'd like to ask you, what are the trends in housing today?
Well, if you've talked to other people in the housing business, you've found that the median cost of a house today is $40,000 plus, which should give some indication to you of how only the upper middle class needs for housing are being met today in terms of new housing. We've always known that there's a change in the market, but it's not the best solution to our needs to think that it's always the upper middle class who get the new house and the lower economic class who gets what's left over. We looked in 1970 at Indiana's housing needs and resources, and this was a study that was conducted by the Division of Planning of the Department of Commerce of the state of Indiana. At that time, Indiana had a total of 1,730,000 housing units. That was a growth from 1960 of 1,500,000 and a growth from 1950 of 1,230,000. Now, our needs for the future, as shown in the report of the Indiana housing needs, will show that in 1980 our projected housing unit demand will increase by some 20%, and I'm looking for that figure right now. What we need to look at in terms of our housing is not the style or the way it's put together, but we really need in Indiana to look positively at the condition of the housing we've got and the amount of housing we're going to need for the future. We need to look at the ways to solve that problem through private construction, private enterprise, through federally sponsored housing to state-sponsored housing, and we have indeed a state proposal before the state legislature for a state housing authority.
If present housing trends continue, what percentage of this housing need do you think will be met in the future? What percentage of people will actually get the housing that they need at a price they can afford?
Well, I'm enough of a dreamer to hope that Indiana is going to meet its problems, and I think we will. We've been meeting a great deal of our housing demand through mobile home units in Indiana. I think that the usage of mobile home units will continue because it is still the most economical way to put people in housing, although it doesn't have mobile home housing does not have the lasting quality that other housing does, so that you cannot count on it 100 years later, and we're using a lot of housing that was built 100 years ago.
The recent housing study came out and said that almost 80% of the people in this country would be if housing would be unaffordable to them right now, the housing that they would like to have, which is, in most cases, a single-family unit, and with the median price right now being $40,000 to $42,000. What is being done in the way of design to combat this, to make housing more affordable?
Well, as I said, one of our major ways is through the mobile home industry, and what we've suffer from there, I think, is a lack of adequate design. It's a field that has not either attracted architects to be involved with the market, or the market has not invited architects in. The market in mobile homes goes much like the furniture market goes, and down in the southeast, you have what they call borax furniture. We have many mobile homes that would fit in that borax category. It's the kind of furniture that's built to copy last year's big seller, so that in the mobile housing industry, we copy last year's big seller, and unfortunately, it's a style trend that something else replaces that next year, and the object always is to do what was last year's bestseller cheaper this year.
How much more affordable is the mobile home unit? What is the average cost of a decent unit?
Well, I'm sorry, I don't know the average cost. If you go out and look at the market, though, you can see that you can buy a new mobile home for $10,000, and that includes furnishings.
How does this compare with space to the normal home? What kind of square footage?
I think that you'll get the space in a mobile home at 1/2 to 2/3 the cost, but you will not get the same quality necessarily. So you have to look at both square footage and quality when you're talking about housing. One thing that you might be interested in knowing, in Region 6, which is the region that Delaware County is in, we're in a region that includes the surrounding counties to us, and we had in 1970 81% of our housing was in single-family units. That's 127,000 single-family units. We had in multiple family units 23,000. That's 14% of our housing supply. And 5,000 mobile homes. That's 3.6% of our housing supply. I think that you'll find some drastic changes coming up in the future, because I think that we are going to be building more multifamily housing, that we're going to be building more mobile homes in the future than we have in the past.
How do you get people to accept mobile family units that have always been raised with the idea that they wanted to grow up and get married and get a house of their own? What do you do to re-educate people to that?
Well, I think that you don't re-educate people. I think they do it themselves. I think you'll find that there are many people who find that the mobile home is their only way to achieve that dream. However, when you look at that dream and you come down and look close at it, you wonder whether a home of your own on land of your own, and when it's land that you rent and the land is a plot 20 feet wide and 80 feet long, you wonder whether that really is an adequate solution to the dream. I don't think we've ever made the kind of comparisons that we might between different kinds of housing, that we might be more helpful to people in choosing the right kind. I think there are a lot of people who think that they do better by buying a home, and others who say, no, you do better by renting. And so I don't think we have the adequate comparisons to hand to people.
Have there been changes in the style of the stationary single-family housing unit that's being designed today?
Well, that's a constant evolutionary process. Unfortunately, I think that many of our changes year to year are just like the automobile industry in Detroit. They're based more on fashion and style than on realities such as economics.
What about
I know when I lived in Denmark some 15 years ago, I lived in a one-room apartment, what we call in America an efficiency apartment. The minimum size for an efficiency apartment in America is about 450 square feet. That will include a one room and some kind of wall kitchen, closet storage, and bathroom. Well, in Denmark, that same unit was 250 square feet and was adequate for my living at that time. Well, you can easily see then, if we're federally supporting our housing, that we're going to save federal dollars if we build twice as many units for 500 square feet as building the one 450 square feet unit, that we save our money. I think that our standards in America need to be lowered. I don't really think that we can afford our standards, just as we cannot afford our energy usage standards. I think we've proved that. I don't think that we can afford the energy and the dollars that it takes to build the housing that we think we need. So I think there is where we need real education.
Yeah, there was an article recently in the Sierra Club magazine, saying that if the U.S. doesn't compact her housing trends and design smaller housing, that we're soon going to run out of space altogether, and no one will have housing or be able to afford new housing because there just won't be the land left for it.
I'd like to see that article. I didn't know that Sierra Club was talking about that. That's great.
Yeah. But I wanted to, are there people designing smaller units then? Are there more compact housing?
I can guarantee you there are. In the mobile home industry, they're designing smaller things every day. And all of the architects who are being given tighter budgets to work with are designing at a smaller scale. But you do come to the situation where you have standards that you have to maintain, and such as square feet of person per room and so forth. And I think that we need some stronger work in that area.
How does the U.S. compare internationally in their quality of housing and in their standards as far as home dwellings?
In America, we satisfy our housing needs better than anywhere else in the world. Anywhere else you go, you'll find people on waiting lists a mile long, or if they're not on a waiting list, as in all over South America, you've got people living in packing crates. And I don't think we can say that for our populace. You've got people in the stories we hear about Russia, people living four to a room in an apartment, and I don't think we'll find too much of that in America. We will not find that as the standard, and a 1 or 2 room apartment for a family is a standard in Russia.
You mentioned lower class housing and wishes for federal subsidiaries and state subsidiaries. What do you see as the trends in lower class housing? How do you see these needs being fulfilled, possibly better than they are right now?
Well, we've got to tackle the problem of housing for poverty income families. If you look at Indiana at the current time, or in 1970, we had 116,000 overcrowded units which had adequate plumbing. We had 48,000 dilapidated units with adequate plumbing. We had 110,000 houses without adequate plumbing. We had a total of substandard housing units in Indiana of 276,000. Now that's out of our market. What did we say was the total housing supply? The total housing supply in the state is 1,700,000. So you take out the 270,000 and you find that 16% of our housing in Indiana in 1970 was substandard. So we've got a big distance to go there. If you look at Delaware County, where we live, we had 21,008 substandard units of housing, total of 13.4%. If you look at the demand for the future in terms of this 1970 housing report, if we look in Region 6, we will need in 1980, we will go up from 156,000 units of housing supply, and that's standard housing supply, to 190,000. So that we have a terrific growth to go, and that will be in terms of income units. From $0 to $5,000 of income, we'll need 52,000 units. From 5,000 to 8,000, we'll need 42,000 units. From 8 to 10,000, That'd be 32,000 units. And 10,000 or more income per family unit, we need 63,000 units. So that's our demand in the future for housing in Delaware County. If you look at our public housing in Region 6, you'll see we have in Muncie 358 units of public housing for the elderly, and that's none of that is specifically designed for the elderly. So we've got a long way to go in terms of supplying our housing needs in Delaware County and in the state of Indiana.
Can you project by, say, 1980, what percentage of the population will be living in single-family homes, how many in mobile homes? I know you read me the figures for 1970. With the knowledge you have, can you project how that will change?
I can't do that, and let me look here and see if there is one of the projections coming out of this survey. I don't find that by type of users.
All right. How big a part does modular or prefabricated housing play in the new home market?
Well, it's getting to be more and more every day. We're very fortunate in having in Indiana a strong modular and mobile home manufacturing supply. We're lucky that Indiana, is the number one mobile home manufacturing state in the nation. So we're lucky to have that capability right here within our state.
So for best value, then, I take it you would recommend for someone just starting out to buy a home to start out with a mobile home?
No.
No?
No.
What would you recommend?
I wouldn't. I don't think you can be that pat in terms of making a recommendation. I think what you would say is the young couple should consider whether they're in a stable situation, whether they're going to be in that same city for a long time, or whether they're fairly mobile and are going to be changing jobs every 2 years. And I think that the best thing to do is to look at the housing that's available within the town where you're living.
There have been several articles come out on the so-called no-frills houses that have possibly less space. They aren't quite totally finished. The builder doesn't all the way finish them. He may put up the drywall and not plaster or paint it. Is there a trend towards this kind of housing over the country?
Well, there are just a heck of a lot of do-it-yourselfers in America, and unfortunately, in many ways, you have to do it yourself in order to get it done in terms of our own economic situation. So that is an answer. We've known, though, that the shell, they used to call this a shell house, where you would buy a shell with nothing on the inside and you'd finish the inside yourself. Well, the shell is the cheapest part of the house to erect. So the no-frills part is the cheapest part. So you have to look very closely at the kind of bargain you're getting in a no-frills house or in a shell house.
Could you cut the tape a minute? My mind just went blank. There seems to be a large trend towards people remodeling existing homes when they're not able to afford a newer home or a larger home as they had planned. How do you see this trend affecting the housing market?
Well, this is the most exciting thing that's happening in America today, is restoring and saving the housing market that we have. Right here in Muncie, we have a good example of several Ball State faculty and townspeople have bought houses, big houses that were once Muncie's finest residential neighborhoods, which have gone on the market. They're just in the area east of Madison Street, and they are restoring the houses and investing money, and they will end up with excellent housing with a total investment less than comparable space would have been in another area of the city. At the same time, they're forming neighborhood associations to work to maintain what they have. And so the combination of the individual enterprise with the forming of the neighborhood association, I think, is a excellent way to look for the future of towns like Muncie and housing nationwide.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.